The warning klaxon screamed through the corridors of the ISS Horizon's edge, as Chief Engineer Marcus Kane gripped his console, watching the proximity sensors light up like a deadly constellation. Micro-meteors peppered the hull with metallic pings that grew louder by the second. "Hull breach in Sector 7, shouted Lieutenant Zara Okafor from the navigation station, her dark fingers dancing across holographic displays. "Emergency bulkheads are sealing, but we've lost primary thrusters." Marcus cursed under his breath, his weathered hands flying over the engineering controls. 20 years in deep space had taught him to expect the unexpected. But this meteor storm had materialized from nowhere. A rogue cluster probably kicked loose from the asteroid belt by some gravitational anomaly. "Auxiliary power is failing," came the melodic, tritoned voice of Kythera Velnoon from behind him. The Elthari communications officer stood nearly 7 feet tall, her iridescent blue-silver skin catching the emergency lighting as her large, pearl-colored eyes tracked the cascade of system failures. "Marcus, the quantum resonance chamber is destabilizing." That made his blood run cold. The resonance chamber powered their faster-than-light communications array. Without it, they were truly alone out here, light years from the nearest human settlement. "Can you stabilize it?" Marcus asked, already knowing the answer from the way her elongated fingers trembled slightly, a sign of distress in her species. "Not from here. Someone needs to reach the auxiliary control room in the lower decks." Kythera's voice carried that peculiar harmonic quality that made it sound like she was singing even in crisis. Marcus was already moving, grabbing an emergency repair kit and portable oxygen unit. "I'm on it. Keep us flying, Okafor." "Where you go, I follow," Kythera said simply, collecting her own emergency gear with fluid grace. It was an Elthari expression he'd heard before. Their species didn't abandon packmates in danger. "This isn't your area of expertise. My telepathic resonance can interface directly with the quantum chamber," she interrupted gently but firmly. "You need me, Marcus Kane." The ship lurched violently as another meteor struck, throwing them both against the bulkhead. Marcus felt the artificial gravity generator stutter, creating that sickening moment of weightlessness before they crashed back down. They ran through corridors filled with smoke and sparking conduits, emergency lighting, casting everything in hellish red. Marcus had worked alongside Kythera for 8 months but always maintained professional distance. Humans and Elthari served together in the Interstellar Research Corps, but relationships beyond duty were complicated. Different species, different worlds, different ways of seeing the universe. The auxiliary control room was a mess of twisted metal and shattered displays. Marcus immediately began rerouting power while Kythera placed her hands on the quantum resonance interface, her skin taking on a soft luminescence as she connected with the ship's systems. "I can feel the chamber's distress," she whispered, her large eyes closing in concentration. "It's like a wounded animal." That was so typically Elthari. They personified everything, felt emotional connections to machines and stars alike. Marcus found it both fascinating and unsettling. "Can you hold it together long enough for me to—" The ship bucked like an angry bronco as something massive struck the hull. Alarms wailed as the lights went out completely, plunging them into darkness broken only by Kythera's faint bioluminescence. "Emergency pods," Marcus said grimly, feeling the ship's death throes through the deck plates. "We need to abandon ship." "The nearest habitable system is 4 light years away," Kythera said softly. "The emergency pods have a maximum range of—" "I know." Marcus grabbed her hand without thinking, feeling the strange warmth of her alien skin. "But there's a moon in this system showing atmospheric readings. Thin, but breathable. If we can reach it." They ran for the pod bay as the horizon's edge died around them, 2 beings from different worlds racing toward an uncertain fate together. Part 2. Crash Landing. The emergency pod's heat shields glowed cherry red as they plummeted through the thin atmosphere of designation Moon Kappa 7. Marcus fought the primitive controls while Kythera braced herself in the co-pilot seat, her bioluminescent patterns flickering with what he'd learned to recognize as intense concentration. Surface composition shows mostly silicate rock with some ice deposits, she reported, her voice strained. Gravity is 0.8 Earth standard. Atmosphere is 21% oxygen, but the pressure is low. We'll need to be careful with exertion. The pod hit the surface like a meteor, bouncing twice before skidding across what looked like a dried lake bed. When the world finally stopped spinning, Marcus tasted blood in his mouth and felt the sharp pain of at least one cracked rib. Kithara, you all right? She groaned softly, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. My people are not built for such dramatic landings, but I am functional. Marcus popped the emergency hatch and immediately felt the bite of thin, cold air. The landscape stretched before them in muted browns and grays under an alien sky painted in shades of amber and rose. Two small suns hung low on the horizon, providing barely enough warmth to keep the surface above freezing. We've got maybe 6 days of food concentrates and 8 days of water recycling, Marcus said, taking inventory of their emergency supplies. Oxygen scrubbers should last 2 weeks if we're careful. Kithara emerged from the pod with careful, measured movements. Her breath formed visible puffs in the thin air, and her usually vibrant skin had taken on a slightly muted tone, her species equivalent of feeling cold. There, she pointed with one long finger toward a ridge of dark rock, about a kilometer away. I sense mineral formations that suggest caves. Natural shelter would conserve our resources. Marcus had stopped questioning how Elthari sensed things. Their telepathic abilities seemed to extend to reading geological formations, magnetic fields, even stellar radiation patterns. It was like they were connected to the universe in ways humans could barely comprehend. The trek to the caves took them 2 hours, hauling their emergency supplies across the uneven terrain. Marcus found himself watching Kithara with growing concern. Her normally fluid movements were becoming stilted and the luminescent patterns under her skin were growing dimmer. Your species isn't adapted for cold environments, he observed, the eye. Elthari homeworld orbits a Class K star very closely, she admitted. What you would call uncomfortably warm is optimal for us. This, she gestured at the barren landscape, is challenging. They found a suitable cave about 50 meters deep, with a narrow entrance that would help retain heat. Marcus set up their portable heater and atmospheric processor, while Kithara arranged their supplies with methodical precision. As the twin suns set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, they huddled around their small heat source, sharing a meal of compressed nutrition bars and recycled water. Tell me about your family, Kithara said suddenly, her large pearl eyes reflecting the heater's glow. Do you have a bonded mate? Offspring? Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Personal questions were rare between them. They'd always maintained professional boundaries. No. My work always came first. Hard to maintain relationships when you're deep. In space 11 months out of 12. Loneliness, she said simply. I tasted in your emotional resonance. That was unsettling. He'd forgotten that Elthari could sense emotions telepathically at close range. What about you? Don't your people form family units? Kithara's bioluminescent patterns shifted to deeper blues and purples, colors he'd never seen from her before. We do, but not as humans understand. Elthari bond through shared experience, shared memory, shared emotion. We call it life echoing. It is more intimate than your concept of marriage. Sounds complicated. Everything worthwhile is complicated, Marcus Kane. She smiled, an expression that didn't quite translate across species, but somehow conveyed warmth anyway. Your people believe in finding the one, yes? We believe in choosing to become one, the you. Heater's fuel cell chose that moment to flicker, reminding them both of their precarious situation. Outside, the temperature was dropping rapidly as the twin suns disappeared completely. We should rest, Marcus said pragmatically. Tomorrow we'll set up the distress beacon and try to extend our supplies. But as he settled into his thermal sleeping bag, he found himself thinking about what she'd said, choosing to become one. What would that even mean between two completely different species? In the darkness, he could hear Kithara's soft breathing and see the faint glow of her skin providing their only light. For the first time since the crash, he wondered if rescue would come at all. shared warmth. By the third day, their situation had grown desperate. The portable heater's fuel cell was down to 30%. The distress beacon showed no response from any passing ships, and their food supplies were dwindling faster than anticipated in the thin atmosphere that required more calories just to stay warm. Marcus spent most of his time trying to jury-rig solutions, extending the beacon's range, improving the cave's insulation with salvaged pod materials, rationing their supplies down to the gram. But he couldn't ignore that Kythera was weakening. Her bioluminescent patterns had grown so dim they were barely visible, and she moved with the careful precision of someone conserving every ounce of energy. The cold was slowly killing her. The atmospheric processors pulling double duty trying to warm the air, Marcus said, checking the readouts on their life support systems. But it's burning through power cells too fast. At this rate, we have perhaps 4 days remaining. Kythera finished quietly. She sat with her back against the cave wall, her long legs drawn up for warmth, looking almost human in her vulnerability. I could modify the heater to burn hotter, but it would cut our operational time in half. Do not sacrifice your survival for mine, Marcus Kane. Your species is better adapted for this environment. He looked at her sharply. We're in this together. I'm not leaving anyone behind. Something in her expression shifted. Surprise, perhaps, or gratitude. You would risk death for an alien crew member? You're not just a crew member. The words came out before he could stop them, carrying more weight than he'd intended. That evening, as they shared their meager rations, Kythera asked him about human bonding rituals. How did his species choose mates? What did love feel like? How did humans know when they'd found their life partners? Honestly, most of us don't have a clue, Marcus admitted, finding it easier to talk in the cave's intimate darkness. We're not telepathic like your people. We can't sense each other's emotions or share memories. We just muddle through hoping we're making the right choices. But you do feel love? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Yeah, we do. It's messy and complicated, and half the time we get it wrong, but when it's real... He paused, remembering relationships that had failed because of his commitment to his work, his inability to open up emotionally. When it's real, it makes everything else worthwhile. Kythera's skin flickered with faint patterns of gold and green, colors he'd never seen from her before. Among my people, there is a ritual called Velthari, the sharing of life echoes. It creates a permanent emotional bond between two beings, allows them to share memories, feelings, even dreams. Sounds intense. It is the most intimate act possible for an Elthari, more significant than your marriage because it cannot be undone. Once two souls have shared their life echoes, they are connected forever, even across death. The cave fell, silent except for the hum of their life support systems. Marcus found himself studying her profile in the dim light, the elegant lines of her alien features, the way her luminescent patterns seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. Why are you telling me this? He asked quietly. Kythera turned, to meet his eyes, and he saw something there that made his breath catch. Vulnerability, hope, and something deeper that transcended species barriers. Because if we are to die here, I would not want to die with words unspoken. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I have carried feelings for you since our first mission together, Marcus Kane. Feelings that grow stronger each day we serve side by side. Marcus felt the world shift beneath him. Kythera, I know it is impossible. We are different species, different worlds, but the heart does not recognize such boundaries. She reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away, and placed her warm palm against his cheek. For a moment he felt something impossible, a flutter of emotions that weren't quite his own, warm and golden and utterly alien, yet somehow familiar. Your ritual, he said hoarsely, the life echo sharing. What would happen if an Elthari performed it with a human? Her bioluminescent patterns flared brighter. I do not know. It has never been attempted. But if we are to face death, perhaps we could face it as one soul instead of two. Outside their cave, the alien wind howled across the barren landscape. But inside, Marcus felt a warmth that had nothing to do with their failing heater. The ritual, the next morning, brought grim news. Their distress beacon had failed completely, its components fried by the moon's unstable magnetic field. Marcus stared at the dead device, calculating their remaining time. 2 days of heat, maybe 3 of breathable air, and barely enough food for one person to survive until then. "So, this is how it ends," he said quietly. Kithara approached him slowly, her bioluminescent patterns swirling with colors he'd never seen before. Deep purple shot through with silver like starlight against the cosmic void. "Not how it ends," she said softly. "How it begins." That evening she began preparing for the Velthari ritual. She explained that it required complete trust, emotional openness, and physical contact to create the telepathic bridge between minds. For an Elthari, it was the ultimate expression of love and commitment. "I must warn you," she said, as they sat facing each other near their dying fire. "Once the ritual begins, there is no controlling what memories or feelings might pass between us. You will see everything. My thoughts about you, my longing, my fear of dying alone on this cold moon, and I will see yours." Marcus took her hands in his, marveling at how her skin seemed to pulse with soft light at his touch. "I understand. Do you? Truly?" Her large eyes searched his face. "Humans guard their emotions carefully. Your species builds walls around your hearts. This ritual will tear down every wall, every defense, every secret you have ever kept." He thought about his carefully maintained professionalism, his fear of emotional vulnerability, his history of failed relationships. Then he looked at this beautiful alien woman who had somehow slipped past all his defenses without him realizing it. "I'm tired of walls," he said simply. Kithara's bioluminescent patterns flared bright with joy and relief. She pressed her palms against his temples, her skin warm against his face, and began to hum, not with her voice but with some deeper resonance that seemed to vibrate through his bones. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Images began, flooding his mind, not his memories but hers. He saw himself through her eyes from their first meeting, competent, dedicated, but carrying a deep loneliness he thought he'd hidden from everyone. He felt her growing fascination with human emotions, her careful study of his expressions and mannerisms, her delight in making him smile during their long duty shifts, and threading through it all, growing stronger with each shared experience, was her love for him, patient, unwavering, and utterly without expectation. She had never hoped for anything beyond their professional friendship, content simply to serve beside him and treasure every moment of connection. But the ritual worked both ways. He felt his own memories flowing into her consciousness, raw and unfiltered. His childhood on Earth, his drive to excel that had cost him so many relationships, his secret admiration for her grace and intelligence, his growing awareness that she had become the most important person in his life without him realizing it. And then she was experiencing his emotions as he looked at her now, wonder, desire, and a love so profound it terrified him because it made his carefully ordered life suddenly seem incomplete without her. "Marcus," she whispered, and her voice echoed strangely in his mind as if she were speaking directly to his soul. "You love me." "I love you," he confirmed, amazed by how natural the words felt when there were no barriers between them. "I think I have for months, but I was too afraid to acknowledge it." "And I love you," she replied, her patterns now blazing like aurora light in the darkness. "With every fiber of my being, across every boundary of species and space." The ritual reached its crescendo as their minds fully merged, creating something entirely new, not human or Elthari, but a hybrid consciousness that belonged to both and neither. For a perfect, eternal moment, they were truly one being experiencing love from both sides simultaneously. When they finally separated, gasping and overwhelmed, Marcus realized something had fundamentally changed. He could still sense her emotions, faint but distinct like an echo of warmth in the back of his mind. "The bond is permanent," Kithara said softly, touching his face with reverent fingers. No matter what happens now, part of me will always live in you, and part of you in me. Just then, a new sound cut through the cave's silence, the high-pitched whine of approaching spacecraft engines. They looked at each other in shock as light swept across the cave entrance and voices shouted in multiple languages. Emergency. Beacon detected, survivors located. Their rescue had arrived just as they'd found something worth living for. After the rescue 3 weeks later, Marcus stood in the observation deck of the medical facility orbiting Kepler Station, watching the stars wheel slowly past. The doctors had pronounced both him and Kythera fit for duty after extensive physical and psychological evaluations, but the real test was just beginning. "The review board wants to see us in an hour," Lieutenant Commander Vega said, approaching with the familiar weight of official business. Marcus had known Jessica Vega for 6 years. She was fair but by the book, and the expression on her weathered face suggested this wouldn't be a pleasant conversation. "What's the verdict?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew. "Fraternization between species is still technically against interstellar core regulations," Vega replied carefully. "The board is trying to figure out how to handle a bonding ritual that apparently can't be undone." Marcus had spent the past weeks trying to explain the Velthari bond to increasingly skeptical superior officers. How could he make them understand something that defied human comprehension? The emotional connection between him and Kythera was subtle but constant. He could sense her moods, her thoughts sometimes bleeding into his own consciousness, her presence a warm glow in the back of his mind even when they were separated. And Kythera? She's already met with the board. Apparently she made quite an impression. Vega's expression softened slightly. "Kane, I've got to ask, was this some kind of alien influence mind control? The brass is worried about the precedent this sets." Marcus almost laughed at the absurdity. "Commander, I've been attracted to her for months. The ritual didn't create feelings that weren't already there. It just made it impossible to lie about them anymore. Even so, the regulations exist for good reasons. Interpersonal relationships can compromise mission effectiveness, and when you add interspecies complications, with respect, ma'am, Kythera and I saved each other's lives on that moon. If anything, our bond makes us more effective as a team." Vega studied him for a long moment. "The Elthari Diplomatic Corps has been very interested in this development. Apparently, successful interspecies bonding could have significant implications for human-Elthari relations. Some are calling it a breakthrough in xenopsychology." Before Marcus could respond, he felt a familiar warmth touch his consciousness. Kythera was approaching. Sure enough, she appeared in the observation deck doorway, her bioluminescent pattern subdued but steady. The past weeks had been difficult for her too, facing endless questions about Elthari biology and psychology, from researchers who treated her more like a fascinating specimen than a person. "The board is ready for us," she said simply, but through their bond, Marcus felt her underlying nervousness. The review hearing was held in a sterile conference room filled with ranking officers from multiple species. Admiral Torres, the human commanding officer of the sector, sat at the head of the table alongside Counselor Jeltar, an imposing Elthari with silver-white skin patterns that indicated advanced age and wisdom. Chief Engineer Kane, Communications. "Officer Velnoon," Admiral Torres began formally. "You stand accused of violating Regulation 23 Alpha regarding romantic relationships between serving personnel, as well as Article 7 of the Interspecies Service Code prohibiting intimate contact between human and non-human personnel." Marcus felt his jaw tighten, but Kythera's calm presence in his mind helped steady him. "However," Counselor Jeltar interjected, her voice carrying the harmonic tones of her species, "the Elthari Collective views this bonding as a matter of significant cultural and diplomatic importance. The Velthari ritual has never been successfully performed between species. If the bond proves stable and beneficial, it could represent a new form of interspecies cooperation." Admiral Torres nodded reluctantly. "After extensive deliberation, the board has reached a decision. You will both be reassigned to the new Deep Space Cultural Exchange Program, where your unique situation can be studied and hopefully provide insights for future human-Elthari collaboration." Marcus blinked in surprise. Sir? Congratulations, you're both being promoted and transferred to the research vessel ISS Harmony. Consider yourselves pioneers whether you wanted to be or not. Later, alone in Cathara's quarters, they held each other in the soft glow of her bioluminescence. Through their bond, Marcus could feel her mixture of relief, excitement, and uncertainty about their future. No more pretending to be just shipmates, she murmured against his chest. Are you sure you're ready for this? Marcus asked. A lifetime bonded to a stubborn human engineer. Her patterns flared with amusement and love. Marcus Kane, I have seen into your soul. I know exactly what kind of man you are. Brilliant, loyal, compassionate, and yes, impossibly stubborn. I would not change a single thing. Outside their window, the stars beckoned with infinite possibilities. They were no longer just shipmates, or even lovers in the conventional sense. They were something entirely new. The first successful interspecies, bonded pair, carrying the hopes and fears of two civilizations learning to understand each other. But in the end, it wasn't about making history or breaking barriers. It was about two souls who had found each other across the vast darkness of space and chosen to become something greater than the sum of their parts. The universe was vast and full of wonders, but they would explore it together, their hearts beating in harmony across the space between worlds.